60 years
of power and connection. Finland serving you. 60 years.
60 years
of progress and direction. Finland part of you.
My name is Basil Williams. I commenced my career in Cane Hall as a trainee diesel station operator. The period of training was for 3 months, and at the end of the 3 months I successfully completed the training. I must point out that those 3 months were spent with an outstanding gentleman, Mr. Leon Dabrel, who I think was the best. In fact, he was known to be the best that VINLEC had at the time in its operation. So I attribute my success to the knowledge that I gained from Mr. Dabrel. But my stay in the power plant didn't last very long, because after just over a year, I was asked to go to Union Island to be supervisor of the Union Island power plant. That plant was in the making several months earlier. Having gone to Union Island as supervisor of the Union Island power plant, I was to spend the next 2 years on Union Island. The power plant, as I can recall it, was opened in early September of 1974. Electricity was going to be operated for the first time on Union Island. And it was quite a new experience for a lot of people. Things went well, but I must point out that it started out with 3 small machines, because it was not expected that what we normally call a load in generation terms was going to be high. And in fact, it was amazing to see in those early days, when you look at your switchboard and the instruments, you were not, and in any given peak period, you were not recording more than 25 kilowatts or something like that back then. But it grew gradually, and when I left in 1976, I don't think we had achieved 100 kilowatts. I guess by now, and at this time, it has grown considerably. The staff, they were about 10, but my successor was not from Union. So one Henry Graham from the Lines Division, the Transmission and Distribution Department, was sent over for a period of time. I was then brought back to mainland St. Vincent, and under then General Manager Ormiston Boy, I was assigned to the Transmission and Distribution Department on mainland St. Vincent. It was a new experience to me. I had to learn the ropes of the T&D department. But coming from an electrical background, it was not difficult. I quickly learned the ropes, learned the various types of situations which exist in the T&D department of mainland St. Vincent. And I think I did it successfully. When I came to VINLEC, we were at the end of what was called the CDC era, Commonwealth Development Corporation era of doing things in St. Vincent. The Commonwealth Development Corporation head offices were based in Barbados. Yes, you had a general manager. We didn't have a structure of engineers as we have today in the company. Engineers came out of Barbados and they worked regionally. They didn't have any particular assignment to St. Vincent or they just go where they were needed to troubleshoot and to solve problems and so forth. The years between 1976, when I returned to mainland St. Vincent, 1976 and the mid-80s, the transmission and distribution department went through terrible times. All sorts of problems existed. There was lack of maintenance, proper maintenance, numerous breakdowns on machines, old and obsolete machines in the Kingston plant contributed to what we called then load shedding. Load shedding was regular. In fact, there used to be in the late 70s, the rationing of electricity, load rationing became a scheduled something in the late 70s, where sometimes for up to 4 hours a day, certain parts of Kingston and its suburbs were taken off because there was no machine to carry the load. One of the things I can say in preparation for the 80s is that the company prepared a number of us, maybe the company through the government, decided to embark on what was called a power loss reduction program. This never got off the ground until the early to mid-80s. And in that process, the company had trained a lot of us in preparation for the work that was to follow. I myself went off to the Irish Electricity Board for training. I spent several months with the Irish Electricity Board receiving training in preparation for the upgrade which was to come at Vinlec. The company by then had sought consultation with other entities overseas, and in the 80s embarked on what is called the power loss or line loss program, where we saw a revamping of the entire T&D system. It also included upgrades in the power stations, new and additional machines in Cane Hall in particular. That's where the expansion was taking place. We had one gentleman with whom I worked closely as line supervisor at the time, who came in from Canada. His name was Ron Smith, to teach us the new standards, American standards of construction. He was extremely knowledgeable in what he was doing. He imparted his knowledge. A number of us received training. And all along, Vinlec itself invested in supervisory training, customer service training, and as I said, keep repeating myself, it was all in preparation for what was to follow, the improvements which were to follow in Vinlec. I recall that line losses at the time, just before the company embarked on the reconstruction of the lines, they were in 30 and above % line losses. And as the years went on, from about mid-80s, to improve the line work in every nook and cranny, to extend electricity where people never had electricity, that was done. Install and upgrade lines where they were considered obsolete and all that. People received improved electricity. And in fact, those line losses went down to something like below, in single-digit numbers, under 10%. It was thought that St. Vincent had attained something miraculous in terms of via the power loss program. So everywhere had electricity, one main line. And in fact, there was urgency to repair the line because it meant that the lines would have been severed. The Richmond power plant would have been generating power up to one point on the northern side, and the Kingston stations was sending power down from the southern end. up from the southern end. The highlight of these is to show you what the workforce used to be like. There used to be 2 large trucks, and each of those trucks used to carry as much as 20 men. And when those trucks had their regular assignments, and when it was required that we take electricity into remote areas, casual workers were employed. In the equation, we later on employed contractors. Contractors came on the scene and we had contractors available. But previous to that, we used to go to the villages where we want to get a pole up the mountaintop and recruit some young men and give them the necessary assistance, help, material, tell them what we want, and they'll put the pole on site, whether it's for an extension or repair or job. But that is what it was then. After Union Island got electricity, and everywhere else was had electricity, and the north of the Dry River didn't have, the only thing I'm going to say about that is that the government at the time said, look, these people can't be without electricity. At that time, the company had employed, as I said, they were embarking on employing young engineers. The expat had long gone, and there was a young engineer from South Rivers. His name was Francis Pereira. He was charged with the responsibility for designing and the line work up to South Rivers, and he worked on it from beginning to end. Crossing the Dry River, the Rabaca River, was a challenge. It was thought that you couldn't cross the lines where the motor vehicle normally traverse. So you went on the interior. The line had to be diverted into the interior of the land to where the river narrows onto the other side of the Orange Hill Estates. I think that was about the biggest challenge. I can recall one day when we were putting on the services. In fact, I went to one of the first houses in the Sandy Bay area, and I spoke to someone at the house that we were connecting, one of the early houses, and they were so joyful, so elated to have electricity over the river, normalizing life like everybody else, they could have it. As colleagues, there's William Johnson, Winston Little, and I'm speaking of people who are still alive. Winston Little, Mr. Little may well be in his 90s and lives at Redemption Shops. Claudius Harry, Tyrone Dixon may seem a young man still, and he's very much alive, but he was vehicle maintenance supervisor. Without him, nothing happened. The fleet couldn't move, but he spent a long time as the company's vehicle fleet maintenance supervisor. Still around. In the offices now deceased, long deceased is, and you go back to that sporting era, Annette Hall, she was a live wire. Louise Brown, who is very much alive. They supplied the snacks and drinks. I remembered Kendall Brewster, who is very much alive and is with us. Linesman, probably one of the better ones. Quite a lot of the people who have gone to the great beyond, who made valuable contributions to Vinlec, and was all part. Ralph Cupid was one of those. Very dedicated worker, and one of those workers who I recalled lived not too far from the power station, so you can find him at home, and when you didn't find him at home, he'll tell you where to find him. Such was the dedication of those old guys. A lot of people may not know this. The firm's competition was like a breeding ground for a lot of young people getting into cricket and other sports. But I am alluding to cricket, where Winston Davis of West Indies fame played with the Vinlec team in what was called the St. Orange Seymour's cricket competition. He also had another brother who's John Whittle, meter reader, billman, I think John was. And it was the breeding ground of a few youngsters who went on to play cricket at other levels. But really, Vinlec won the competition several times. I can't recall the years. Good cricketers came out of that competition. Vinlec was known not only for the power in electricity, but for the power in cricket. They also played, they had sponsored soccer teams, and members of staff played football. I remember a team in the Belfongo belay competition, and I think they played in other competitions. Congratulations, Invincy Electricity Services, on attaining 60 years as a company.